I got to know, how the heck did you get a hold of gem.com? I thought that 3-letter domains, I view them as like unicorns. They're mythological.
Every time this is like ultra premium.
When I go to a company and they have a 3-letter domain, I'm like, you must just be from 1980. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of What Worked podcast. We're joined today. I was joking about this one because I have never, and Mike is the same, we've never actually met Steve, our wonderful guest today, Steve Bartel, one of the co-founders of Gem. So I'm happy to announce that this is not a catfishing situation. Steve is a real person. He is on the podcast, and we're really excited to have him on today to talk all things AI, recruitment, all the above. So Steve, if you don't mind, we'd love to hear a quick introduction, who you are, and also your most up-to-date elevator pitch on Gem.
Sounds great. And do remind me, at some point, I want to hear that catfish story, because it sounds like it's happened before.
Unfortunately, yes. We'll talk about it off the air.
Looking forward to hearing it. Well, thanks for having me, Tyler and Mike. It's great to be here. I'm Steve, the co-founder, CEO of Gem. At Gem, we're building world's best end-to-end recruiting platform. So imagine if you had a recruiting CRM plus an ATS plus sourcing automation, scheduling automation, talent marketing, recruiting events, and analytics all in one platform with AI threaded throughout the whole thing. That's what we're building at Gem. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's kind of everything you could possibly need under one roof. But I can't imagine that you started that way. I'm really curious. I did a little bit of research on you, obviously, and I heard a little bit about your beginnings. But I'm just curious, when you set out to build Gem, what was the initial problem you were trying to solve? I can't imagine that you built this all-encompassing product to start with.
That's exactly right. When we started, our vision was always to build an end-to-end recruiting platform that covered all these bases and more. We're going to continue to come out with new products over the next many, many years. But when we started, we actually started with sourcing automation first. And that's because back then, there really wasn't much to help with sourcing and automating all of the manual and tedious work that goes into, finding people, looking up their contact info, sending reach outs, sending follow-ups, and then, of course, having good data to identify what about your outreach strategy is working and not. And so when we got our start, we were actually called Zen Sourcer. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
That was during the time when
Zen was popular.
Very
popular naming convention. So we know the era. You've kind of dated yourself. So.
Oh, yep. There, I've done it again. Oh man. Yeah. Zen Sourcer. The story behind the name is actually kind of funny though, because we were just about ready to dive in to working on what became Gem back then, after doing maybe like 50 conversations with other leading companies about how they manage their top of funnel in recruiting. And we realized, we heard from a friend that the YC application for applying late, we had less than 12 hours to submit an application.
Whoa.
We're like, holy cow, all right, we got to whip something together. And the first field in the application is, what's your website? And then the next field is like, what's your company name? And we're like, all right, crap, I guess we need a company name. And so we just started going on the domain site and searching. And we're like, all right, I guess Zen Sourcer is available, and it kind of covers what we're setting out to do for the first year or two of the company. So let's just stick with that for now and then revisit down the road.
That is incredible. And you're making me, I feel like Zendesk is one of the only ones that still remains of the Zens. I'm sure there's other
Zen
ones.
In the room. Yeah.
That's the big Zen. I do remember that when everyone was like, pay Zen, or kind of Zen everything. I am curious. You mentioned, really specifically, right, this challenge with sourcers, which we're very familiar with here at HireFrame. That's a lot of the work that we do in sourcing talent in nearshore and offshore markets. You were an early stage employee at Dropbox. Did you personally, was that kind of where you had your aha moment where you were seeing the challenges, in kind of top of funnel for recruitment?
Yeah, exactly. So I was at Dropbox for 5 years. I was there from 25 employees until
Wow.
1,500.
Yeah.
Crazy amount of growth in
Crazy.
4.5, 5 years. And recruiting was our number one priority that whole time as we were scaling through hypergrowth. And um, we really leaned in. The whole company, it was like all hands on deck. And so I got a lot of exposure to recruiting as an engineering manager there, a lot more than most. I was doing everything from recruiting full cycle for my own roles. Back in 2013, I went to our VP of engineering and said, "Hey, I think we should start a data science team." He's like, "Yeah, that sounds great. Why don't you go start a data science team?" And so I go to our recruiting team and I was like, "Hey, like, Aditya, our VP of engineering, said we should start a data science team, and I'm going to, start hiring for this." They're like, "Great. Why don't you go hire for a data science team?" Because
Right.
our recruiting team was so slammed back then, and we were just doing everything in our power to stay ahead of our growth for like most of our other roles. And so I just rolled up my sleeves and I was my own full cycle recruiter for 2 years as I
Wow.
built out our data science team there.
And you picked arguably one of the toughest places to start, because you correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember when data science started, wasn't a big part of the kind of big challenge was that this whole notion of being a data scientist, right? It's kind of like people just started calling themselves data scientists, and
Yeah.
right, if I'm not mistaken, I think I'm trying to remember who it was. There was a famous founder. I think it might have been Chamath who says that.
Yep.
I think he credits himself with inventing that. But yeah, what was that like for you? How did you find this talent pool where there was no talent pool?
It was wild because it was the Wild West back then. People were just calling themselves data scientists. There was so much demand. Like every company was realizing we need data scientists, but there weren't people trained in the job because it was such early days. And so there were a lot of self-proclaimed data scientists. Anyone could go on LinkedIn and just call themselves a data scientist. And so you had to like really cut through the noise. And so of course, like I tried the traditional routes. We posted a job. I went down to Stanford and gave like a talk to their graduate program because some folks down there were just starting to catch on to this data science thing is real, and like maybe they would want to have careers in that, but it was still super early days. But none of the traditional avenues were working in terms of filling the role. We were hustling to get referrals. And so at some point, I just rolled up my sleeves and started to do my own sourcing on LinkedIn. And wow, like that's where I learned firsthand just how manual and tedious it is to like, find great people. But then more than that, like reach out to them. And, as I was reaching out to folks on LinkedIn, I was realizing I wasn't getting a great response rate. And as I dug in and like learned from our recruiters who had a lot more experience with sourcing than me, they're like, "Oh, no, you should be using email because like 40% of LinkedIn talent has their notifications off." So I'm like, "Oh, shoot, now I got to go find someone's email address.
Yeah.
I got to send them follow-ups because nobody's responding." And it was a huge mess. Like we were doing all that in spreadsheets back then.
Yeah, we're both furiously nodding our heads. Higher frame.
Right.
We got our start as a company in supporting a lot of outbound sales teams. So SDRs was kind of our bread and butter. And that's why Mike and I can definitely relate. A lot of the initial problems that we solved just had to do with all the tedious and administrative tasks that SDRs were, sort of handling every single day. Basically, they would spend 3 to 5 hours of their day just doing data entry, and they would, like, the smidgen that was left, they would try to actually sell. So it sounds like when you thought about the first product, were you really targeting helping sourcers and kind of like freeing them up to do what they do best?
That's exactly right. And we were targeting sourcers and full cycle recruiters that were doing their own sourcing. And you hit on something really interesting, which is the parallels between recruiting and sales. Because the Dropbox experience was what ultimately led us to go start Gem, but it wasn't the aha moment. Back then, I was like, "Oh, I guess this is just how it is. There's no better way." And so I was just furiously doing all this manual data entry and like sending these manual emails and manual follow-ups. And I didn't yet know that there could be a better way. Fast forward a few years later, me and my co-founder, Nick, were thinking about teaming up and starting a company. And we were actually looking at a completely different idea in the sales space.
No way.
Right.
Love it already.
Yep. And we didn't end up going and starting that company because we didn't quite know enough about sales. We had never done sales before. But
Sure.
as we were looking at the category, as we were talking to, 50, 60 different folks about how they manage their inside sales teams, we're like, holy cow, like sales and recruiting are remarkably similar.
Yes.
A lot of the roles are very similar. You've got SDRs on the sales side, which are very similar to sourcers in recruiting. You've got AEs, some of them are full cycle, just like full cycle recruiters managing people through a pipeline, right? You've got sales ops, which is very similar to recruiting ops. And back then, like that was still earlier days for rec ops because recruiting was becoming a lot more operational. It was becoming a lot more data driven, just like sales was. Yet in recruiting, there was no technology to support any of these things, right? But look at all this awesome stuff that sales and marketing teams have. And
Yes,
so
totally.
that was the aha moment for us around like, hey, like, why don't we just bring some of this awesome technology that exists for sales and marketing and bring that to the world of recruiting? And as we were seeing like what's available in sales and marketing, that was the aha moment for, oh, there's like a whole new world that should be possible for recruiters. It's just no one's built it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine what the technology was at the time, like the incumbents in recruiting. It was probably quite ancient, and I'm sure not intelligent at all. And I will say that where I totally agree with you as well, it's a great space. Is there's also so much data in recruiting, just like there is in sales. It's a very data-rich environment. Everything, for the most part, is already kind of formatted in a way that lends itself to future insights. Mike, I know I've been hogging the questions, but I'm curious.
I was just going to draw some connections. Yeah, I was going to draw some connections to this comparison between sales and marketing, sales and recruiting, because we do it all the time. Tyler and I do. See, some of our best recruiters were SDRs when they joined Hireframe. We trained them in the SDR role, and they were like, okay, after a couple of years, they're like, hey, I want to try something different. Well, we're like, where your skills are extremely transferable? It's recruiting. And so that's been a great talent pipeline for us, is the SDR to recruiter motion, but also the other way around. We actually look for recruiters as we're building pipeline for any revenue generating roles at Hireframe, because we just think there's like a great transfer of skill set. So the same insight that you had and you applied it to technology, we applied it to recruiting and staffing essentially.
Yeah, we love recruiting.
That's so cool.
I got to ask, I have two kind of follow-ups for you about sort of the beginnings of GEM and now where you are today. My first question is, you started off really focused on sourcing, but obviously today, as you go to gem.com, you see that it's a full platform of essentially covering every part of the recruiter kind of tool chest, if you will. How, I'm always curious, because this is something that we think a lot about. How did you think about what to tackle next, right? Because I'm sure in those early days, you had customers that said, it would be nice if I had XYZ, and you're having to manage engineering resources, time. I'm sure you're probably trying to think about how you can get revenue to raise your next round, right? So, how, as a first-time founder, how did you manage all of that?
That's a great question. In the early days, while we started with sourcing, we always knew our vision was much bigger than that. When we were getting started, we saw this very similar category in the sales space called sales automation. And that's like Outreach, SalesLoft, ToutApp, SendBloom. There's dozens and dozens of these folks that were serving the sales market. And it helps with automating a lot of the manual, tedious work that goes into prospecting on the SDR side, which is super similar to the workflows in recruiting. In fact, when we were talking to 50, 60 companies about how they do their top of funnel recruiting, some of them were adopting these very same sales tools for the recruiting. And that was a lot of like validation for us that we were on the right track, that core thesis of like recruiting becoming more and more like sales was spot on. But from the beginning, we had a much broader vision for GEM because we quickly realized that a lot of these sales tools, they kind of have a ceiling where Salesforce takes over. And that becomes your source of truth for sales. But in recruiting, there just wasn't a great source of truth for everything that was happening because your incumbent solution, the applicant tracking system, it was designed for an old way of recruiting. back when really the state of the art 30, 40 years ago was just to post jobs and wait for people to apply. And what it didn't help with was all of the work that goes into hiring before somebody becomes a candidate, before they become an applicant. And that was the much bigger pain point when we were talking to customers in the early days of GEM. And it wasn't just sourcing. It was everything that happens at the top of the funnel, whether that's passive referrals, whether it's campus recruiting efforts, whether it's talent marketing initiatives, recruiting events. All of this stuff was managed in spreadsheets or in random point solutions that didn't really write back to the ATS, didn't write back to a central source of truth. And so from the very early days of GEM, like our vision became, how do we build the source of truth for recruiting? So after we got a lot of the sourcing pieces in place, the very next logical step became, well, how do we build a source of truth for the top of the funnel in recruiting? And what do we call that? Well, let's call that a recruiting CRM, because it's all about relationship management and how do you manage relationships with passive talent. From there, we now had all of your top of funnel data in one central place for the first time. We thought, well, why don't we integrate that with your applicant tracking system, pull in all of the data from when somebody enters the process and provide really great analytics, very similar to like how sales and marketing teams are measuring their entire funnel. Let's go enable end-to-end analytics on top of your CRM data plus ATS data next. So that became our third product. And then we just went one by one and kept biting off the different use cases that were part of that original vision, expanding into recruitment marketing with like forums and talent communities, expanding into recruiting events so that you can manage all of that out of one platform. And over the last year, we've gotten much, much closer to that ultimate vision because we've finally bit off applicant tracking system and are looking to fundamentally, change the game there. So that was the ordering, but all of it just kind of felt really natural in the moment.
Yeah, would you say this is a fair comparison? As you're saying all of that, I can't help but think you're like the HubSpot of talent acquisition. Would you say that's kind of fair?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think we simplified it and to investors and also like employees, folks that were thinking about joining GEM, we always said like, oh, we're trying to build a sales force for recruiting. But HubSpot for recruiting is a much more accurate depiction of like actually like apples to apples in terms of like all the different use cases that we covered. And now that we're building our own ATS, I think we're getting more into like the Salesforce for recruiting territory.
Yeah, Steve, kind of rounding out this this customer centric, like customer focused part of this conversation about like what's really valuable to the customer. I imagine like what helps me understand the power of a product or service or like a company is understanding like what customers, why do they initially engage GEM or something like GEM, and then ultimately down the road, where is the actual value coming from? So as an example, for Hireframe, customers usually come to us and they're like, hey, look, we're looking for cost savings. But a year or two down the road, what happens, the business impact is actually an understanding and know-how around building a remote overseas team. That's where the actual business impact. They're like, oh, we started with this one role, but we've realized this can be applied to many different functional areas within our company. That's where the true value is. And so for something like in your space, like GEM or just other products in recruiting, I imagine like people come to you or they come in about, they're like, hey, I want to save my TA team some hours every day or some hours every week. But what's like the bigger impact that you're seeing now that you've been in market for a while? Like the business impact you're seeing across the TA teams, that's kind of like a pleasant surprise once they've been using GEM for a while.
A lot of folks come to us because they realize that we can help them save time. Through automation, we can make their recruiting team more efficient and more effective. And so, yeah, that's why a lot of folks initially look for GEM. A lot of them are also come to us when they realize that the candidates I'm getting from my inbound applicants is just like not enough to hire great talent like fast enough. And so there's this connection to like, yeah, we make the team more efficient, but we also help you fill your roles where you wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And that actually, when you put together like an ROI use case for something like GEM or something that can actually help you fill critical roles, that's where a ton more value ends up being created for customers. Not everybody's thinking that way at first, but when you think about the cost of not having the sales reps in place that you need to hit your revenue target on time, now you're starting to affect a company's top line revenue by helping them
100%.
place those hires faster, right?
Yeah, the cost of not having a seat filled is like a secret, like hidden cost to a company that's prohibiting growth and hitting certain milestones.
Exactly. So when companies are thinking that way, it just becomes such a no-brainer to get modern technology that can help them with recruiting and hitting their hiring goals. And it's not just for sales reps, it's for tons of roles. When you actually math out the cost of like not having your technical talent driving your digital transformation efforts as an enterprise, I mean, that's an existential risk to your business. Like, how are you going to stay relevant in 5-10 years as a large enterprise if you can't go reinvent yourself to be like a modern tech company? And so, yeah, I think a lot of the more sophisticated companies are thinking in terms of that opportunity cost of not getting the right talent in the door. But, to your original question, I think a lot of the sort of pleasant surprise, like sort of hidden value, unexpected value, is when people actually jump into the analytics and the data and they realize how much more data driven they can be. And, folks use that data for a bunch of things, including debugging and fine tuning their hiring process, helping to capacity plan, like how many recruiters do I need to hit my hiring goals? But then they realize, I could be using this to forecast and see whether I'm on track. They start to realize I could be taking this data to my executive team meeting and showing up as a strategic partner to the rest of the organization. And that's the awesome moment for like TA leaders and RecOps leaders when they realize that they can elevate their role within an organization by showing up proactively with data. And those are the stories I always love to hear. It's when our champion, our stakeholder who bought Gem and is now like getting really data fluent becomes this hero internally at their company.
Absolutely. In a past life, I was similar to you. I was an early hire for a company that I was employee number 4, and we scaled to 13,000 employees in around the same amount of time that you were at Dropbox. Now, granted, that was a call center company, so a lot of people, right? But I can definitely relate to a lot of what you experienced. And the interesting thing to that really resonated there was we were selling to people in customer experience. So vice presidents of customer service and, customer operations, that sort of thing. What we used to talk about arming those folks with the data and information and insights they need to get a seat at the table with the executives. Because a lot of times, if you're in the customer service department, you're raising your hand, you're going, guys, we need, 100 more people. Like the customers were not responding quick enough. And then the executive team says, yeah, but the engineering team, that's where our focus is. And there's kind of this, kind of bartering you have to do. And without the data and insights, you don't have anything to work with.
Totally. And it's the exact same in recruiting when it comes to advocating for more budget or more headcount. Or like, you need us to reduce time to fill. Well, this is what we need to do to be able to do that based on like data from other departments and orgs.
I got to ask you this question before I do want to transition into some other hot topics here. Of course, we will get to AI. Anybody who's listening to this, I'm sure you're like, why have you guys not talked about AI? We'll talk about that. I got to know, how the heck did you get a hold of gem.com? I thought that 3-letter domains, I view them as like unicorns. They're mythological.
This is like ultra premium.
When I go to a company and they have a 3-letter domain, I'm like, you must just be from 1980 or something like that.
Where do we give you our money? This is
yes. So you sold your soul is my assumption. So someone has your soul somewhere. No, yeah. Tell us the story about that.
Oh man, that brings me back. So we started the company by calling it Zen Sourcer in the early days. And that was always a placeholder name. We even made a promise. Our second engineer that we brought on board, he came on board contingent on the fact that we were going to change our name after our Series A.
That's hilarious.
We all agreed.
Too funny.
This is not the right long-term name, especially when we think about the bigger vision for Gem and how we're going to cover all of these different products and ultimately build the source of truth for recruiting. And so we wanted to come up with a name and a brand that was a lot more scalable. Something that we could put in front of all the different products, like Gem ATS, Gem scheduling, Gem sourcing, in the similar to Google Photos or Google Maps, Gmail, right? And so we wanted something a lot more scalable. And we raised our Series A, and we thought this is the perfect moment to change our name, because how else are you going to get the word out that you're now named something else? When you're a startup, nobody really cares. You're not newsworthy, but fundraising announcements are kind of the one shot you have every year or two to get some word out there. And a lot of people will announce a new product, or in some cases, if they're doing a big rebrand, it's the perfect time to announce that. And so then began what we thought might be a 2 or 3 month process, but ended up being a 7-8 month process of trying to figure out how to change our name and what to change it to, and then all of the details of getting it right. So yeah, we were racking our brains trying to think of what to call our company. It felt like a big decision, because you're not going to change your name twice. I promise you that. So
you just think of
someone would say you shouldn't do that.
I'm trying to think of anybody who's done that and lived a tale.
I mean, there's probably some great company that's done that. We're just not aware of it. So it's always an exception, but
yeah, totally.
But yeah, it felt like a much bigger decision. I mean, gosh, the amount of time it took us to choose ZenSourcer was all of 30 minutes. And we're like, all right, but this is our one shot. Let's go name it right. And we were thinking about all sorts of different names, and it was this really frustrating process of, every time we'd think of a good name, we would go check, and it was taken. Then we'd think of another great name, we would check, it was taken. We would think of another great name, we would check, and be like, yes, we'll sell it to you for $3 million. We're like, what?
Yeah, you're looking at that Series A money in the bank, and you're like, okay, 3 million. We still have this much left.
You're missing. I think there's a mini step in between that you failed to mention, but it's you checked if the name was available. It wasn't available. You removed one vowel. You removed one vowel from the name, and you're like, all right, is that available? No. Okay, now we move on. No.
Yeah.
No, it's a good point. But there's all these different best practices around naming, and actually one of the things that we felt really strongly about after we had gone and done a little bit of research from how other companies had rebranded was that it should pass the radio test, meaning that if you say it out loud, somebody should know how to spell it. And so we didn't want to mess around with vowels. We also wanted to make sure we could get the .com, because we're like, hey, we're going to go through all this process of rebranding anyways. Might as well get the .com. It's got to pass the radio test, as in it's got to be spellable. When you say it out loud, you have to know how to go type it into a search engine, or better yet, just like gem.com to go find the site. And so we had all these things that would help us rule out names. And, early on in that process, I got really excited about the name Gem. I got really excited about the name Gem because there was this really fun, cute backstory. At Dropbox, we used to manage all of our recruiting in spreadsheets. And we were really big on passive referrals, and the idea that we should just be referring anyone great that we want to work with, even if they're not ready yet, because we knew that recruiting is all about timing, and that if you build relationships with the right people over time, then you'll be ready for when they start to look, right? And that's how we hired a lot of great people at Dropbox. And we had these spreadsheets, and we called them our list of gems.
Mm-hmm.
Because these were the short list, the 10, 20, 25 people we would hands down want to work with no matter what. Even if they weren't looking, we were spending time with them every few months, multiple times a year. And so we called those our list of gems. And it, I don't know, it just felt right in terms of the tie back to recruiting, finding your hidden gem.
Sure.
Had a lot of cute metaphors with sourcing and prospecting. And so we reached out to the owner of gem.com. And at first, we got back a price that was just way too high. We couldn't afford it as a small startup. And we went back to the drawing board. We spent another 2-3 months looking for names.
Wow.
And at some point I was like, let me just try to get this person on a call. And we did, and we explained why we wanted to call the company Gem. And we also learned more about her situation, and that she was getting a little bit older. She bought the domain on a whim in the 90s.
No way. So she wasn't sitting on like a bunch of domains. It was like individual domain she had owned.
Yeah, no, she had decided to buy this domain, gem.com, in the
Oh my
90s,
goodness.
kind of on a whim. And her story was really cool. Like, she bought this domain. She had been using it for her personal use. She had an email address with it. And she was getting to the point in life where, she wanted to start passing on some money to her grandchildren. And we're like, oh, that's really cool. I wonder if there's a way we could structure something that was a win for you and also like a way for us where we could actually afford the domain as a small startup. And we got really creative and we put in front of her an 8-year payment plan.
Wow.
Where we would gradually pay for the domain over the course of 8 years. So we could still get the price high enough for her to get excited about that. She could start passing on money to her grandchildren every year within that tax benefit.
Yeah.
And as a startup, like, there's two likely scenarios. Either you keep scaling and you raise more and more money over time, and then you can totally afford that over 8 years, or you don't make it. And we framed it as like here's a down payment for a house, here's our mortgage. And if at any point we can't pay you for it, you get it back and you can go resell it to anyone you want and you get to pocket all that money. So,
wow.
Just like
great deal making.
Yeah, it's like rent to own, basically.
Exactly. It was this rent to own. Exactly. It was rent to own for domain names. And so that's the story of how we found the Gem domain. And it was really awesome to collaborate with Roberta on that and also to hear her story.
Shout out Roberta, I was going to say. And I got to think, for in the HQ, do you have like a meeting room named after Roberta? I feel like that's only fitting.
We don't, but I think we had a call booth because...
okay.
The one that you made the famous call in.
Yeah.
As part of like switching over the domain, we had to set up Roberta with her own email address and like one where she could still get emails forward from like Roberta@gem.com. And one of the engineers was just on these like, video conferencing sessions with her in a call booth for a few hours back then, helping get that all squared away. But internally, all of our conference rooms are actually named after gems now.
That's very cool. And I was going to say, I was kind of shocked that it wasn't owned by, when you said you reached out to whoever owned it, I pictured, some like, rare stones, rare, like mining company. Yeah, rare minerals company in like, wherever, in some far off part of the world. And they're like, no, you need to deliver us a bag of gold bricks and then you can have this.
That's a great story though.
That is a great story. And I am curious, so obviously if you go to your site, the first thing that is, plastered right in front of you is AI, right? And AI is everywhere right now. And as we talked about, talent acquisition recruitment is kind of a ripe environment for AI because there is so much data. There's so much manual work. I am kind of curious though, when you started off, in creating Gem, I imagine you weren't talking so much were you talking mostly about automation versus really, and then I'd love to hear, as the rise of LLMs happened, what was your thought as a founder in this space? Were you like, we got to go all in on this? Was that an easy decision for you, or what were your thoughts there?
Great question. So when we started, there were a number of companies that were selling AI in our space, and there was buzz around it. There was a lot of hype around it. But when we started, like, the AI just wasn't very good. And when we actually talked to customers that were using these AI systems 7-8 years ago, a lot of them got really excited about the value it could deliver. But when they came time to actually implement it, they would be very underwhelmed with the results. And so while it was selling really well, we realized that back then AI wasn't really driving as much real value for customers. The algorithms just weren't very good. They were completely black box, meaning that if AI spit out a hiring decision or something like that, you'd have no insight as to why. Recruiters didn't have much control over the algorithm itself. And then the quality just wasn't very good yet. And so for a lot of reasons, we kind of thought that a lot of companies were selling snake oil when it comes to AI back then. And we're like, yeah, I mean, maybe eventually, especially if the technology gets much better, but there's such simpler problems to solve in recruiting. For example, Like, why go build AI if something as simple as like a follow-up email can't be automated yet today?
Totally.
And so we stayed really focused on just like driving value for recruiters, building a product they love, really awesome automation. And so by the time LLMs finally came out and started to disrupt AI, we're like, oh, this is really interesting. We need to jump on this. We need to go all in on it. And it lines up really nicely with one of our core values of automation and saving recruiters time. Because I think for the first time, LLMs are actually going to enable AI to have results that are high quality enough that give transparency into how the AI is actually making decisions. Because you can actually ask an LLM, like, why did you make this decision? And it can spit out like 3 to 5 reasons as to why. So now you can have algorithms that are transparent. And you can give recruiters control. They can actually have inputs into the LLM technology, which wasn't really possible with legacy AI solutions. And so a lot of these pain points with legacy AI were suddenly able to be solved and possible with the advancements in LLMs. And so we very quickly jumped on that and said, all right, we need to go reinvent the company to be AI first and go all in on this.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I imagine you felt like you had to move at a million miles an hour because the AI revolution is happening so fast. Mike, you were going to ask a question.
Steve, if you could share a couple, what are the most common applications of AI on TA teams today? Just to bring it to life for the audience that might not come from recruiting or be in this space like the three of us are.
So there is a lot. And actually, it's really interesting because it's hard to separate some of the signal from the noise. So I'll share a few like high confidence use cases that I think are driving real value. But there's also a lot out there. And folks are saying, we've got AI for this thing. And sometimes it's not even AI or LLMs under the hood. It's pretty hard to know what's real and what's not. So I'll start by saying that. In terms of AI applications, LLMs are really good at anything that's text-based. And so resumes are text-based. And so anything that has to do with stack ranking and doing basic like text-based matching in terms of like qualifications, is this person a good fit for these qualifications? Now, those kinds of problems like AI has actually suddenly gotten a lot better at. And so in terms of where that can be applied, it can be applied to a lot of places, pretty much anywhere where you'd have a profile or a resume. So one great application is AI ranking. So a lot of companies right now are dealing with a huge influx of inbound applicants.
Yes.
In fact, there are candidate tools that leverage AI that let you apply to thousands of opportunities in one click.
Yes. Yeah.
And so there's like a little bit of an AI arms race happening where candidates are now empowered with these tools that make it zero cost to apply to thousands of roles. And there's more candidates on the market than ever. And so companies are drowning in inbound applicants, and it's actually causing a pretty big challenge for them. Just to get through all their inbound takes a lot of time. And the types of things that are suffering as a result are candidate experience. I mean, this is why we hear so many stories of folks being ghosted online. It's actually because recruiters are overworked and overwhelmed and under-resourced. And so the idea that like AI could help stack rank your inbound based on a set of qualifications that you provide as a recruiter is a really compelling use case. And so I think like AI ranking for your inbound, AI ranking for your ATS and your CRM records to help you identify folks that are already in your system that could be a good fit for a new role that opens up.
Yes.
I think that's another really strong use case of AI. And then I think for the first time, AI sourcing, as in sourcing bots that can actually help identify external talent that could be a good fit. I think for the first time, that's starting to become good enough to be commercialized. There's definitely been solutions in the market over the past 10, 15 years, but many of them just couldn't quite get the quality level to where it needs to be.
Totally.
And I think it's going to be a game changer. I think AI sourcing is going to be a game changer, and not just for in-house recruiting teams, but also for staffing companies too.
Yes.
And yeah, I think it's just going to help like save a ton of time all around, and it's going to allow recruiters and sourcers to focus on the more strategic parts of the job.
Yeah, and you hit on some great, sort of like key pain points for us as a staffing firm. The one that really resonated with me is this idea of we spend, if you look at, probably our operating expenses, I would say, the largest percentage goes towards sourcing top of funnel candidates. And so one thing as a founder who sits here and, looks at the balance sheet every month or whatever, that kills me is I'm like, guys, it's the old Arrested Development. There's always money in the banana stand. The banana stand is our database of previous applicants. I'm like, if somebody's in there that we should be talking to, it drives me insane if we overlook that, because we did the work to find that person, to vet them. They're in there. Let's find them an opportunity. So you really resonated with that one. I completely agree.
Exactly. And usually the fact that they're in there also means that they might have some existing relationship with you. And so you're not starting from scratch. You're not starting cold. You're starting with somebody that maybe has already raised their hand in the past.
Yeah, and I love this notion too. I know that I saw that you guys are working on a lot of your product has to do with this, basically staying in touch with applicants, right? The candidate experience. And I think that's a great opportunity as well for AI. Switching gears here, I am curious, what are your thoughts on the future opportunities for AI? I got to think that one of the big ones is you mentioned what you're making use of today is the most readily available data, which is resumes, interactions over email, right? The applicant tracking system, the CRM itself. But recruiters, right? They spend a lot of their day doing this. They're talking to people. And I'm curious if you see future opportunities as we take that data and put it into a format that can be actually ingested by an LLM and acted upon.
100%. And that was going to be the second big use case that I actually think is already being addressed today. And there's some great platforms out there that we hear from our customers are getting a ton of value from, which is call recordings. And in the world of sales, like we've had companies like Gong and others for a long time that help provide insights on top of sales calls. In recruiting, we're doing a lot of the same things. We're on calls with candidates. We actually have this unique challenge, which is we're doing all these like full panel interview loops. And that data is so rich in terms of the kinds of insights you could pull out. And the thing that's gotten a lot better over the last 1 to 2 years is transcription through LLMs, and then summarization.
So much better. Yes.
Totally summarization. Great. So transcription's gotten a lot better, but summarization has gotten like 10, 20 times better. I mean, I just go into Gong and I look at like the call summaries now and I'm like, wow, that's actually exactly what we talked about. And those are the next steps that we talked about.
Yes, totally.
And so there are some really cool companies that are doing interesting stuff with this in recruiting, like BrightHire, for example, being one of them. I believe there's like 2 or 3 more that I hear really good things about. And so I think that's like another really great application of LLMs and AI today. And there's some great like vendors doing interesting stuff with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And great. We have so much visibility because for Hireframe, we've worked a lot with sales organizations. So when you're making a lot of references that we totally get in Gong. And I couldn't agree more on these summaries. Oftentimes when I do these calls and I look at my, I use Fireflies for notes, right? And I'll look at the Fireflies note. Yeah. And I'll look at that and I'll go, you know what? My job might be in danger because the robots are closer than you think, I think, and figuring some of this stuff out. Just waiting for the avatar me to start doing sales calls. I am curious. So when you go to your LinkedIn, this is something that I'm going to get a little bit of founder to founder inside baseball here. I noticed on your LinkedIn, you write, author of Startup Hiring 101, right? And I'm just so curious about your decision to create that resource. When I think about the growth of companies, oftentimes they'll have some sort of hook in their early days that serves as a great lead magnet. And I'm just curious, like around the decision to create that resource, because it looks like it took some time. How did you think about it? And you're laughing. I hope it didn't take you like 5 minutes. But yeah, how did you think about creating that? And what did you envision? Did you get that return on that you were looking for? What role does that play in the story of Gem?
Yeah. So LLMs came out and I decided to ask out. No, I'm just kidding. I was going to joke.
That was good delivery. You got me. And I was going to be like, I was going to be so sad because I was going to be like,
we're going to cut this section out. Or
yeah. David,
no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I was laughing because I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours writing that content.
Yeah, it looks like it. You can tell.
And it's good. It's really good. And you gave away the keys to the kingdom. You really did on some awesome stuff.
Totally. It's so Startup Hiring 101, it's a collection of resources. It's almost like a wiki. It's everything you need to know as a startup founder, building your founding team, really geared towards first-time founders that maybe haven't recruited that much, or if they haven't recruited in the context of a startup, which is very different from recruiting at a big company where you have an established talent brand. And so that the types of things that work for, Dropbox at scale or Google or Facebook or, name your other big tech company, they don't really work for small startups. And so, when we were getting started, we had to kind of figure out all this stuff the hard way. And we learned so much, both by just doing it ourselves, by scaling Gem from 0 to 9 people to 25 to 75 to a few hundred people. That was the arc of Gem in the first few years. And from working really closely with so many recruiting teams and so many startups on their hiring, right? So we kind of got great global insight into like a lot of hiring best practices and what really works for small startups. And so I had always like dreamed of writing up the playbooks and the templates and like the actual things that we did to recruit for Gem in the early days at some point, and like packaging that up as a guide for startup founders, but it never really felt like the right time. And then COVID hit. And I realized, wow, I have a lot more time on my hands.
You're like, suddenly I'm very much stuck inside.
Super stuck inside. And I have all these weekends.
You were like, become really good at Fortnite or write Startup Hiring 101?
Or both. There's time for there's time for some video games in there too. But I remember early days of COVID, like we had all just moved back to work from home for the first time. There wasn't much to do, and I was just sitting there. I'm like, Saturday morning at 11 a.m., like no plans. What am I going to do? And I just opened up my computer and I started writing. And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And 3-4 months later, I had this massive guide. Some people, my editor, called it a tome because of how long it was. He liked to make fun of me for it. But then when he actually looked at it, he read it. He's like, oh, there's some really good stuff in here. And he helped me polish it up a little bit. And I open sourced it. And so, a lot of people think like, oh, like, maybe we wrote this in the early days and this is how we got our start with startups. But it was actually, no, it was much later in the Gem journey. And it was more an act of like paying it forward in terms of like helping out the next generation of founders. Because I got so much help from other founders that had, blazed the trail before me. And along with that resource, we also started our free startup program. That was also born out of COVID. Back when a lot of companies were doing hiring freezes in those first few months of COVID, it was uncertain like when companies would get back to recruiting again. We're like, oh, like this seems like a great time to launch a free startup program for these small startups that maybe are filling like 1 or 2 more roles, but they're very uncertain as to like how much hiring they're going to have to do moving forward. And so we launched the first ever program of its kind for this space, which was like 2 years of free Gem for any startup that's less than 15 employees.
Super cool.
And so super valuable program, the same technology that thousands of the biggest and best tech companies use now, like small startups could use for free for 2 years. And this guide almost felt like a nice companion resource to the startup program in the sense that between the right tools and technology, plus like the how-to, founders would have everything they need to go build their founding team.
That's really cool. You're paying it forward. Here it was. I was definitely giving you the label of like some like inbound marketing ploy. You really just, it was an act of love that I'm sure, you probably have some cool stories though, where you're maybe at like some type of, mixer at like a VC. And does anybody come up to you and is like, hey man, like I read your guide and it helped me hire the first,
or 5 people. You hear people talking about startuphiring101.com like at a happy hour, and they have no idea that that's your creation. I imagine that happens.
No, I totally get people coming to me all the time, and they're surprised that when they dig in, they're like, "Oh my gosh, there's so much here. You really covered all the bases." And so, no, it's really cool to see it having that kind of impact. I mean, thousands of people have read that guide, and thousands of startups have used Gem for free as part of our startup program. So it's awesome. It's really cool to get to pay it forward.
Very, very cool. Speaking of paying it forward, we have just, thoroughly enjoyed this time with you, Steve. Incredible story about Gem. Honestly, the domain story alone is a reason why someone should listen to this podcast. We always like to ask our guests as one kind of final closing question is, what is the best way to get in touch with you? What's your kind of preferred channel? And also maybe speaking of paying it forward, what do you want people to reach out to you about? Outside of, I'm sure, of course, potential customers that are looking for a great all-in-one recruiting platform solution.
Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Steve Bartel. I also post there pretty regularly. So if you're interested to follow, more stories about startup life, about being a founder, about recruiting best practices, recruiting operations. I read a lot of content about that. Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also drop me an email at steve@gem.com. If you're a small startup just looking to hire your founding team, highly encourage you to check out our startup program, gem.com/startups. It's free, completely free for up to 2 years until you hire your founding team. And then if you're a growth stage company or an enterprise, I mean, that's our bread and butter. We've got thousands of customers ranging from, the best and fastest growing tech companies to large enterprises.
Staffing firms?
Staffing firms. Yeah, about 10% of our revenue comes from staffing firms. So that's a really important part of our business too. You can check us out on our website at gem.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for your time.
Thanks, Steve.
Officially, this is not a catfishing story, so thrilled about that. We appreciate it. You heard it from the man himself. You can reach out to him on LinkedIn or at his email. And then definitely if you're a startup and you're looking for the best possible price, which is free, you go to gem.com, sign up for the startup program, find those first 5 people, and then the rest is history. Thank you so much, Steve.
Great to be here.